What is up, you guys? I have a brand new review for you, and today's review is on the brand new Neca King Kong of Skull Island. This is Neca's third King Kong figure. I just received it. It's fairly new, and I decided I'll make a review on it. I haven't done a toy review in a long time, mainly because on my main channel, yes, this is the second channel, but on my main channel I switched up my content a lot, so I didn't really have time to do figure reviews, but I just want to make one for the fun of it, so let's get right into the review. So here is the Neca King Kong and everything that he comes with. I'm going to briefly go over his accessories, and then I'll get into detail with Kong and his articulation. So here's just a quick little view at Kong. We're going to save him for later in the video. But as for his other accessories, he comes with a pair of fists. He comes with a pair of grabby hands, I guess you could call them. He comes with one of my favorite accessories in this set, a tree trunk. He comes with an alternate head, which is a growling head. He comes with a pit monster. And finally, he comes with a pterodon. Now, again, before we get into Kong, I just want to go over some of the accessories. I want to go over these three in particular and some of the detail they have, because they are more detailed than just a pair of hands and the other head sculpt, which I'll also review, but when we get into Kong. So the first accessory I want to take a closer look at is the pterodon. The pterodon is very, very nicely detailed and very nicely sculpted. He has some paint on the back of him, on the front of him, and the paint overall is really good. I do wish he came with a stand because, as you can see, he's hard to stand up, and you can't even have him in flight poses. I guess the really only way you could pose him is if you got some, I guess, sticky tack and stick him to the floor, get your own flight stand, or if you don't have any of that, just have Kong hold him or punching him or something. But this figure actually does come with some articulation. His head can move around, and his jaw can open very wide, and yeah, the pterodon, really nicely painted and a really cool accessory. And the next accessory I want to take a look at is the pit monster. Apparently, this inspired the skull crawler in the Monsterverse, which is a really cool fact. But for just the pit monster himself, he also has some articulation. His head can move a bit, and he has a hinged jaw. And it can't really open that wide, but you get what you can out of him. And as for sculpt and paint, it's also really, really nice looking. And the last accessory I want to take a look at is the tree trunk. The tree trunk, I think, could have been a little better. I think it could have been darker, and instead of these, I guess, pinkish, tannish paint applications, they could have done more brown. I'm just really not a fan of the lighter color tone. I think it should have been darker, but it does get the job done. Now, finally, we're going to be taking a closer look at King Kong himself. He's very nicely sculpted and very nicely painted, and I love the little scratch marks and battle damage he has. It looks really good on the figure. I also really like the eyes. The eyes are super glossy and look very lifelike. And this head sculpt in particular looks a lot like the puppet from the original King Kong movie, which I do just love. And there are some detail inside the mouth. As you can see, for other details on him, he just has sculpted fur, which again looks very nicely painted. And all around, King Kong looks really good. Now let's get into his articulation. So at the head, you have a ball joint, and you could get some okay range. He can look up really far, which I enjoy. He can't look down very much, but really to support that, you have the torso. This King Kong head sculpt also has a hinge at the jaw. And another thing I'm a little disappointed with the head sculpt is how you can't really look that far right. Like, say I wanted Kong like this, he can't really look that far in that direction, which I guess the head sculpt does look really good, and I guess since of the hinged jaw and everything else and how big the head sculpt is, it can't really move that far. I still think it gets the job done for what it's worth. For the body's articulation, you can get a pretty nice crunch and a really, really nice arcing back. When you do a crunch, there's a little bump at the back. Really, you're not going to see the figure from the back, but if you really don't like that, you could just put him in a neutral pose, and it'll hide that all right. The body can move to the left pretty good, and to the right pretty good, and all around, it's pretty good range. For the arms, it can move all the way around, and you could spread them out pretty far. For the biceps, you can also swivel them, which gives you some really good posing. and same for the lower arm. You have a double hinged elbow, which I really, really enjoy. You get some really good poses out of this, and it's one of my favorite aspects of the figure. The wrists are on a swivel. You can't move them out very much. It's especially noticeable with the grabbing hands, because you do want some poses where Kong can grab the floor with those grabbing hands, but you can't really achieve that with the range this wrist has. And now for the legs. The legs can move up pretty far. Neca did make the smart decision to make this plastic very light. As you can see, I could kind of like poke through it, and that does allow the leg to go up really far. The leg can't move back really far, mostly because of Kong's dump truck, but there is some more flexible plastic in case you do really need it to go back as far as you can. For the knees, another thing I love is it's also double hinged, and I just love that. Look at that pose. And for the leg, for the lower leg, you can also swivel it away from the knee, but this does limit the knee's articulation, so I wouldn't really recommend doing it unless you really need to get it for that pose. Now, if there's one thing I'm really disappointed with in this figure, it's the feet posability. You really can't get much out of it. I really, in poses, if you can move it up more would be really helpful, and back, but you can't really. But you could get pretty good pivot out of it, and I guess it's all right for what it's worth, but I wish it could go up and back a little farther. Now we're going to take a closer look at what Kong's alternate heads and hands look like on him. As for the growling head, it looks fantastic. It really looks like the Monsterverse Kong, which I love. You can have some pretty cool displays with that if you'd like. If you don't want or can't afford the SHMA Kong, then this one is a really good alternative. Yes, he is a bit big, but if you crunch him, it works. And again, just really love the glossy eyes and the glossy paint added on the gums and teeth, and the battle damage is excessive on this head sculpt, which I adore. And I just didn't think I'd love this head sculpt as much as I did. I thought I'd be using the more goofy, puppet-like head sculpt, but this one is very, very impressive. Now we're going to be taking a look at some of the alternate hands Kong comes with. So these are the default hands you get in the box. They are the grabbing hands. They're mainly used for the tree trunk. It fits in pretty nicely. It just slots in there. If you want a tighter grip, just push it in more, and it looks pretty good. You can get some poses with both the hands on the tree trunk. The grabbing hands can also hold the pit monster. You just gotta kind of finesse his tail in there, and it'll eventually work out. Just like so. As for the Pterodon, he is not the easiest to put in Kong's hand. I guess if you also just finesse his legs in between Kong's thumbs, he can hold him, but it doesn't look that natural, and I don't think this monster was meant to be held. And next, Kong has his almost grasping or clenching hands, and these hands I really love. They really capture Kong's aggressiveness and monkey-like behavior. I use these the most when posing my Kongs, and I just gotta say, I love these hands. I especially love the detail on the palms. They really look like a suit made back then, or a maquette or puppet type thing, and I just can really appreciate that. Neca did a great job. And next up, we have the fists. Finally, the last pair of hands he comes with, and these fists are pretty nice looking. Again, these are kind of a necessity for all action figures, and especially for Kong, you need that monkey pound in his chest, and these fists just look great, capture his aggressiveness really well, and again, Neca just did a great job on these hands. Now we are going to be doing some quick size comparisons and comparisons in general, and first up, we have the other two Kongs that Neca has released, and I gotta say, this Kong looks great with the others. I'd say if you have the original Kong, I'd still recommend you get this one. You have a lot more posing opportunities, and just having two Kongs on the shelf is pretty cool. If you have the illustrated Kong and not the original, I definitely recommend you get this one, because it's always nice to have a normal colored Kong. And for our next two figures we're comparing, we have the Maso King Kong of Skull Island, and we have the Neca Godzilla 1962. I think the 1962, while it's a little smaller than this King Kong, I think it still works for some retro displays. Recreating some poses from the newest Godzilla vs. Kong movie with the retro figures, I think works really well, and is a cool display for your shelf. I think if you just crunch Kong a bit, then the scale would be just right, but even then, I don't mind Kong being slightly taller than Godzilla. And the next two figures are the SH Monster Arts Godzilla 2019 and the Neca Godzilla 2019. I don't have the original Neca Godzilla 2019, but this one is the same thing, just different paint. And I think if you do want to recreate some of the newer Godzilla vs. Kong scenes from the 2021 movie with this figure, I still think it works pretty well. Again, you might have to crunch Kong a bit, but I don't think it's that big of a deal if he's that taller. If you need the exact height and the exact measurements, then I guess this one isn't best for your display, but I still think he's really good. He comes with the tree trunk, which you could use for the axe and everything, and I think he's a great substitute for the SHMA if you can't afford him. So, in conclusion, the Neca Ultimate King Kong of Skull Island figure is a fantastic figure, and I definitely recommend it if you're a Neca collector in general, or if you're a Godzilla or Kong fan. He is great for any display you may like, and I think he is a fantastic figure, and I can't wait to get the new King Kong figure that was just recently announced by Neca, which is the New York Empire State Building version. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you do want to, please subscribe to my main channel. I don't post this type of content, but if you do want to support me, then just subscribe over there. And I will see you in the next video. Goodbye. Now again, before we get into Kong and his articulation, I want to go over some of these accessories because they are not just, you know, some things you could just throw in for no, they are.